פרק ג' משנה ו'. כבר הזכרנו בפתיחה למסכתנים, we already mentioned, שחכמים מסרו לטלטל בשבת דברים שהוצאו מכלל שימוש בשבת מסיבות שונות. The sages told us you're not allowed to touch or move anything that is not used for Shabbat for many reasons. איסור זה נקרא מוקצה, and this is called מוקצה. A lot of people think מוקצה means you're not allowed to touch. מוקצה doesn't mean you're not allowed to touch. What מוקצה means is that מוקצה ממחשבה, that you, when Shabbat came in, you didn't have in mind to use it. So there's many reasons why a person couldn't have in his mind to use something on Shabbat. Something because it's not allowed to be used. For example, a car. You didn't think about using your car on Shabbat, so that's called muktzeh. But it can be things that you're allowed to use. Yeah? For example... On Shabbat. Yeah. For example, I don't know, paper. Yeah? Let's say you want to take a piece of paper and you want to, I don't know, do something with it. Put it under something. You're not allowed to. Because before Shabbat, if I would ask you, are you going to use this on Shabbat? No. You said no. So that would mean muktzah. It wasn't in your mind to use it on Shabbat. Anything that wasn't in your mind to use it on Shabbat is called muktzah. And you're not allowed to touch it now. Okay, and we're going to see, this Mishnah is going to start explaining this. כלומר, דבר המופרש והמובדל. It means muktzah's thing that are separated. What does it mean in our case, which we're going to talk about? שלא היה מוכן מערב שבת להשתמש בשבת. It means on Friday night, that thing wasn't ready to be used for on Shabbat itself. And he's going to give you an example in the Mishnah itself. וכבר מנינו שם סוגי מוקצה שונים. We already mentioned many types of מוקצה. I'll give you an example. You go to the kitchen and you've got a piece of roast beef, and all your knives in the kitchen, somebody came the previous day and stole them. So you don't have any knives in the kitchen. But you remember that you have your shochet knife somewhere else. Are you allowed to use the shochet knife now? No, why? Oh, because before Shabbat, if I ask you, are you going to use it on Shabbat? What would you have said? No, so you can't use it now. That's a good example. You understand? If I ask you, are you going to use these knives on Shabbat? You're going to say, yeah, I use them every Shabbat. But now somebody stole them, you don't have them. You're still not allowed to use the other one. Because before Shabbat, usually you don't use it, you can't use it. Understand? Yep. משנתנו עוסקת באיסורי מוקצה. So all this Mishnah is going to deal with מוקצה. Our Mishnah over here itself. Number 1. אין נותנים כלי תחת הנר. You don't put a vessel under the candle. You remember the candle was a jar, it was like a pot full of oil. And also you have to put in the mindset, oil was expensive. In that time. It was very expensive. People didn't just throw away things like today, you know. So sometimes the oil on the container will leak. You know, it will leak out. So you don't want it to go to waste. So what would you do? That's right. You would put a vessel under it. You will put something under it. כבר ביארנו, we already mentioned, שנר, which means a candle. היינו כלי שנותנים לתוכו שמן ופתילה. It's a vessel you give inside of it oil and a wick. ובא משנה ללמד, and the Mishnah comes to teach you, שאסור ליתן בשבת כלי תחת הנר. That if it's Shabbat, and you see your candle, it's a light, right? And it's dripping over here, you're not allowed to put another vessel underneath it, so it will drip into the vessel. Yeah? Not allowed to. Why? לקבל בו את השמן, to receive the dripping oil in it. הנוטף מן הנר, that the oil is dripping from the candle. Why? Mishum she'ashemen muktzeh. Now let's see what's the problem. The shemen itself is muktzeh. What does it mean, muktzeh? If I would have asked you before Shabbat, are you going to use this oil for your food? No. First of all, it's dirty. It's not nice. And second of all, you were thinking that it's all going to be late. It's all going to light. So now that it's getting collected over here, right? Let's say the oil extinguished. The ner is completely gone. There's no more light. And now it's on the Shabbos table. Are you allowed to take from this oil into your food?
No.
Because the oil is what? Oil was not, you didn't think about it before Shabbat to be used for Shabbat. You thought that it's going to get completely burnt. Okay? This oil was designated only for light, only for the candle. Ve'asur betiltul, and therefore, this is called muktzeh. You didn't think about it before Shabbat. It was out of your mind before Shabbat, so it's not allowed to be touched now. וכשהוא נוטף לתוך הכלי, and now, when this oil drips into this vessel, you know what you're doing? You're taking a vessel and you're not breaking it physically, but you're breaking it. What do you mean you're breaking it? You're making it not be, this vessel was allowed to be used on Shabbat, and now you're putting it under the candle, and when the oil drips into it, what happens? Now you cannot touch the vessel. So it's like you're taking a vessel and you're making it not a vessel anymore. And you're doing that when? On Shabbat. And when you do that on Shabbat, that's the problem. It's almost like breaking it. You're not allowing this vessel to be used now. Do you understand? You're allowed to after Shabbat. But on Shabbat, you know what you caused the plate that you put underneath it? You caused it that now cannot be used. So it's like you took the plate and you broke it for Shabbat. It's true that after Shabbat you can use it, but for this Shabbat, it's like you broke it. So that's why we're not letting you to put it under. Even the vessel is prohibited in moving. And this is the rule now. It's going to tell us the rule. ואסור לבטל בשבת כלי מהיכנו. This is the ruling. One is not allowed to nullify on Shabbat a vessel from its purpose. This vessel, this place had a purpose. You could eat on it. And what did you do? You put it under, and now you're not allowed to eat on it. That's not allowed to do on Shabbat. You're not allowed to take something that you're allowed to do something with it and make it that you're not allowed to use it. That's not allowed to do on Shabbat. כלומר, מהיתר טלטולו. Now you're not allowed to move this plate. ולתנו במקום שלא יוכל עוד לתלו משם. You're not allowed to put this plate or this vessel into a place where you're not allowed to move it from there. שזה כקובע לו מקום. Because you know what you're doing? It's like you're building. It's like you're sticking it. It's like you're gluing it to the table. וכאילו מחברו ביתית. It is like you're actually building it. You're making it prohibited to be moved. ודומה לבונה. It's similar to building. That's one thing. So for the first reason is, the reason why you're not allowed to do it, it's because like you built it into the table now. That's the first reason. טעם אחר, the second reason, שזה כסותר. It's the opposite. You're not building it. The first thing I told you, you're breaking it. What does it mean? I was able to use it beforehand, now I cannot use it. So you broke the vessel for me. שמוציאו משבת מכלי שימושו. That you took it on Shabbat from the way of using it. And this is, by the way, a machloket Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says, you're breaking the vessel. It's like you're breaking it. Now I can't use it. And Tosfos is saying, you're building. You just attached it to the table, now I cannot move it from the table. Yeah? The same idea. You're not allowed to do it in any manner. Okay. Now, so that's on Shabbat, right? What happens if you put it Friday night? Before Shabbat? Would you like to put it on? Yeah, you're putting it Friday night under so that it will drip into it. What do you think? You're allowed to Friday night?
אם אתה לא משתמש בווסר הזה בשבת, כן?
Yeah, because you're thinking, okay, let's see. ואם נותנו בי בעוד יום, and if he puts it there when it's still Friday, אם הוא נותן תקליט תחת הנר בערב שבת מבעוד יום, when it's still Friday, מותר, he's allowed to. ואין חוששים, it says, whoa, I can tell you, I'm giving you a reason why you shouldn't be allowed to. You know why you shouldn't be allowed to? Can you think about a reason why we shouldn't allow you to do it?
אם תשתמש
Or maybe I can think you're going to, you know, after the candle is going to be finished, the next day for lunch, you have a bowl full of oil over there. You might use it. Okay, so let's see. ואין חוששים, we are not worried, שמא לאחר שיפול שמן לתוכו יבוא לטלטלו בשבת. You're not worried that after the oil is going to drip into it, you're going to come to move it on Shabbat. It says you don't worry about that. Even though maybe you should, don't worry about it. It's okay. But, are you allowed to use from that oil? On Shabbat?
No.
ואין נאותים ממנו, and you're not allowed to enjoy it. אסור ליהנות בשבת מן השמן שנטף מן הנר. One is not allowed to take the oil from the candle and use it for his food, obviously, on Shabbat. לפי, why? Why? Why am I not allowed to use it?
מה שאמרת, מוקצה.
Why is it מוקצה?
כי לא חשבת.
או לפי שאינו מן המוכן. Because it wasn't ready in your mind from before Shabbat. You didn't plan it. You didn't plan on this oil to be there before Shabbat. You thought that the oil is going to be burnt. שהוא קצת להדלקת נר שבת. You designated this oil for what? For lighting the candle. You didn't designate the oil for eating. Finished this subject. Next subject. Ready? מטלטלין נר חדש. Okay. So, let's discuss this a little bit. It's an interesting concept. There's a concept of muktzeh mechamat mi'us. Muktzeh mechamat mi'us means you're not allowed to touch it on Shabbat because it's disgusting. Most candles that they had, were considered disgusting. You wouldn't touch it. Why you wouldn't touch it? It was black. You know, it was a candle and oil. It was yucky and black. And if you touched it, you become dirty. Yeah, it wasn't something that you would touch. So that's called muktzeh mechamat mi'us. So let's say you have a candle on Shabbat that is not lit. It's not lit. There's no fire in it. Are you allowed to move it? Are you allowed to move it? So this says no, you're not allowed to move it. Do you know why you're not allowed to move it? Not allowed to touch it? Because before Shabbat, did you have in mind to touch it? You didn't. It was away from your mind. Anything disgusting on Shabbat, you don't plan to touch. Right? So you weren't planning to touch it, so you're not allowed to touch it. Just like your knife, you weren't planning to touch because it's an expensive knife. This, you're not allowed, you weren't planning to touch because it's disgusting. Right? So you weren't planning. So now the question is, are you allowed to move it? So that it looks like? No, it's disgusting. What about if it's new? You didn't lit it in yet.
If it's Shabbat, no.
But it was never lit and it's not light. There's no light in it right now.
Right, yeah.
Oh, you understand? Because it's not disgusting. Maybe in your mind you said, what's the problem? But the question is, what are you going to use it for? So I'll tell you what you're going to use it for. Maybe you want to put beans inside. It's a container. It's a container, right? Maybe you want to put beans. Maybe you want to put garinim. So are you allowed to use it for garinim? That's the question. That's our question. What do you think? Now, if it was used,
No.
because for sure you weren't thinking to put garinim, it's disgusting. But it was never used yet. It's just a kli. What do you think? You think that you will be able to. Okay, so let's see. That's what we're going to be discussing. Okay. Metaltelim ner chadash. You're allowed to move a new container, a new ner. Kli ha'asui lener. It's a vessel, it's a container that it's supposed to use for a candle. Kol zman shu chadash, but you're only allowed to do this when it's new. Klomar, which means שעדיין לא השתמשו בו להדלקה, as long as you never used it for lighting. הואיל והוא ראוי לשימוש של היתר. Why? Because there's a way to use it for permissible things. Like I said, you can put nuts in it, you can put chocolates, you can put sugar inside. There's a lot of uses that you can have for it. מותר לטלטלו בשבת. Therefore, you're allowed to touch this candle on Shabbat. Right? But what about if it was used? אבל לא ישן, but not an old one. ner ישן, an old candle, אף על פי שלא הדליקו בו בשבת זו, even though on this Shabbat you didn't light it, you did it before, 3 months ago, but three months ago you didn't use it. Are you allowed to use that, to move that on Shabbat? It says no. אסור לטלטלו. You're not allowed to move it. שהואיל והשתמשו בו כבר להדלקה, once you used it once for lighting, שוב אינו ראוי לשימוש אחר. It's now, you're not going to put anything inside of it. It's disgusting. והרי הוא מוקצה מחמת מיאוס. It becomes muktzeh because it is disgusting. Good? So it becomes complicated. You ready? Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, listen to what Rabbi Shimon says. Very interesting. Let's see if you agree with him. כל הנרות מטלטלים בשבת. You're allowed to move any candle on Shabbat. Any candle on Shabbat. חוץ מן הנר הדולק בשבת. Except if the candle is not lit on Shabbat. So let's think what Rabbi Shimon is saying. You have a candle on the table, right? You lit it. After 3 hours, it's not lit anymore. So now you're allowed to remove it or not? According to Rabbi Shimon. Yeah? On Shabbat, even though you lit it on this Shabbat, 2 seconds after there's no more light, you can move it. This is what Rabbi Shimon says. What do you think? No, why do you think Rabbi Shimon says yes?
כי זה, אם אתה תרצה להשתמש בגרעינים וזה, אתה יכול.
It's mius. It's disgusting. I think Rabbi Shimon is saying, what are you afraid of? What do you think is the problem? What's going to be a problem according to Rabbi Shimon? So let's say you moved it. What are you afraid of? You're going to break Shabbat? How are you going to break Shabbat? Is there any way for you to break Shabbat?
No, muktzeh pashut.
Just muktzeh. So maybe Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold on muktzeh. Maybe he doesn't believe in all the laws of muktzeh. That's what it looks like. So let's try to understand Rabbi Shimon. Let's look inside. בשעה שהוא דולק, at the time that he is light, אסור לטלטלו. Then you're not allowed to move it. And even then Rabbi Shimon says, you're allowed to move it. It's not a problem to move it. But I'm afraid if you move it, the wind is going to extinguish it. That's what I'm afraid. Shema yechabenu. It says the reason I don't allow you to move it is because maybe it's going to get extinguished. Or mipnei, or because שהנר הוא בסיס לדבר האסור. This is another concept we never learned before. That if there's something prohibited on top and it sits on something, you're not allowed to move the things in the bottom. For example, if I put a candle over here, no, forget a candle. If I put money over here, I'm not allowed to move this on Shabbat. Because the money is muktzeh, and this is, I'm moving something which is prohibited to move on Shabbat. Right? So the same thing over there, it says, what's prohibited? The candle is not prohibited. You know what's prohibited? According to him? The fire is prohibited. Once there's no fire anymore, what's the problem? That's the way he's thinking. We're saying the candle is prohibited. He's saying it's not the candle is prohibited. What's prohibited? The fire is prohibited. The candle is fine. Okay. Hainu hashalevet. It means the flame. Aval bi'inyan muktzeh. Oh. So here comes Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon looks like disagrees with the sages when it comes to muktzeh. Let's see what he says. Binyan muktzeh. Cholek Rabbi Shimon al chachamim. Rabbi Shimon disagrees with the sages. Ve'eino osro betiltul. And he doesn't prohibit us from moving it. Lo muktzeh mechamat mi'us. Ve'lo muktzeh mechamat isur. Rabbi Shimon says there's no such thing as muktzeh from being disgusted and muktzeh because it is prohibited. In other words, it says if I can find a use for it, I'm allowed to use it. I'll give you an example. If you ask Chachamim, in our logic, right? If you ask Chachamim, let's say you're eating nuts, if you're allowed to eat nuts or not allowed to eat nuts some other time, right? But let's say you are eating nuts on Shabbat, and you figure out you don't have your nut cracker. It's gone, you don't know where you put it. So are you allowed to go to the garage, bring a hammer, and break the nuts with the hammer? So according to what we said before, you're not allowed to. Why? It wasn't in your mind. According to Rabbi Shimon, because there's no such thing. It says a tool that I'm allowed now, I find a use for it for Shabbat, even though the tool is not allowed to be used in Shabbat, I'm allowed to use it in Shabbat. Don't tell me you're not allowed. I can find a kosher way to use it, so let me use it. I'll give you another example. A television. Right? There's a television in the middle of the room. Not like today. Today the flat screen. Do you remember the big ones? Yeah? Big television. And your table broke. Your small table broke over there. So you take the television and you put it inside on the floor and you put a map over it. According to Chachamim, you're allowed to do that? According to Rabbi Shimon? What? I'm using it like a table now. So let me use it. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. So Rabbi Shimon does, when it comes to muktzeh because something is disgusting, or muktzeh because something is prohibited to use on Shabbat, he doesn't hold this muktzeh. He says, once I can use it, I can find a legitimate use for it on Shabbat, I can use it. But lo muktzeh ha'alacha, what's the law? So who do we go by? Who do we go by? Do we go by Chachamim or Rabbi Shimon? So the law is shener shedlikiu leShabbat, that a candle that you lit it for Shabbat, af leachar shekaba, even after it's extinguished, asur letaltelo kol oto Shabbat. You're not allowed to move it the entire Shabbat. So let's take an example from our days. If you put the pamutim, the candlesticks, on the Shabbat table, you can move them. That's right, they're stuck. They're there the entire Shabbat. You're not allowed to move them. Even after they become extinguished, you want to move the so you know what some people do? Practically, you know what some people do? They put, these plastic covers on the table, the plastic tablecloth, and they cut a hole where the pamutim is, so that they lift it over the pamutim, and that they can take it out, because they cannot move the pamutim, and they can clean. So that's the way they do it. Some people do that. There's other ways to move it out, but we didn't learn it yet. So when we learn it, we discuss those other ways. But so far, if you just put the two candlesticks on the table, you cannot move it on Shabbat. So, asur letaltela kol oto Shabbat says. Let's look at the rule. But it says, I don't understand. It looks like Rabbi Shimon is right. After it's extinguished, I should be allowed to use it, to move it. There's nothing prohibited over there. So he tells you the rule now. Why not? שהואיל ונעשה מוקצה לשעה, לשעת בין השמשות, it says, once it is muktzeh in the beginning of Shabbat, it's not, if once it's not allowed to use a little bit of Shabbat, we're going to say it's not allowed to use the whole of Shabbat. So even if it was only not lit 1 second into Shabbat, in other words, it was not you're not allowed to touch it 1 second into Shabbat. Now you're not allowed to touch it the entire Shabbat. That's the rule. So anything that if it was on, you wouldn't be allowed to touch it or move it because it's on Shabbat. Even for it was on for 1 second, 2 seconds, you would not be allowed to move it at all in Shabbat, even after it gets extinguished. נעשה מוקצה לכל יום השבת. ברם, בת, בשאר נרות, a candle that you did not light. What do you think? It's disgusting.
It's disgusting.
Then you would think,
Why you can move if it's not?
aha, but the sage just said it's muktzeh because of disgusting. But the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, not like Chachamim. It says you are allowed to use it, even though it's disgusting. Since you did not, before Shabbat came in, it was permitted to be moved, you can still permit it to be moved. So we do a little bit like Chachamim, a little like Rabbi Shimon, in plain halacha. The Chachamim would not allow you to move it on Shabbat. Today, Rabbi Shimon says, בשאר נרות הלכה כרבי שמעון. In the שאר נרות, the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, which means that Rabbi Shimon trumps the Chachamim. Very strange. We usually don't have Rabbi Shimon. Let's see if this is a hard one. Not hard though, but hard to conceptualize. נותנים כלי תחת הנר אפילו בשבת. You remember we said you're not allowed to put a vessel under the candle on Shabbat to receive the oil. Why not? What was the reason? Because you're breaking the vessel. You remember? You're taking a vessel that was ready to be used and you're breaking it. Now I'm not going to use this vessel anymore. From before Shabbat? Before Shabbat we said you're allowed to. On Shabbat, you're not allowed to. Because you're breaking the vessel on Shabbat. You're taking a vessel that you can use and you make this vessel unusable on Shabbat. Right? That's what you're doing. So we say you're not allowed to do that. So now we have a different little bit. Sometimes the candle shoots sparks. Right? And you're afraid that the sparks are going to do what? Fire. Going to do fire. So you put a tray underneath there that it's not going to catch on fire. So let's see. נותנים כלי תחת הנר, you're allowed to put a vessel under the candle, אפילו בשבת, even in Shabbat, לקבל ניצוצות, so they receive the sparks. So I don't understand, Moshe, this is a hard one. How come I'm not allowed to put the candle under the oil, but under the sparks I'm allowed to? Yeah, פיקוח נפש maybe. פיקוח נפש maybe because it's dangerous, but maybe it's not the end of the world. Let's say it's not the end of the world. If it's pikuach nefesh, for sure you're allowed to. Let's say it's not pikuach nefesh. You just don't want it to get damaged. Let's say that's the point. Let's say you're not afraid that the house is going to be lighted on fire. It's not pikuach nefesh. It's just damage. You put it there. Why do they allow you? What? Yeah, but if the oil drips into the tablecloth, it's going to ruin the tablecloth. Am I allowed to put the thing under? No. Same thing. Oh, so let's see the logic. It's very interesting. לקבל ניצוצות של השלהבת of the fire כדי למנוע דליקה, so that you don't want it to get damaged, a fire, לפי, so he tells you why. שהניצוצות אין בהם ממש. Because after you put the candle of the tray over there, the next day, would you find something over there? There's nothing there. Sparks is nothing. There's nothing there. Oil, there is something there, but ניצוצות are zero. There's nothing there. ומותר לטלטל את הכלי שנפלו לתוכו. And also, afterwards you're allowed to move it. Because there's no oil in it. There's no muktzah in it. There's nothing in it. That's why you're allowed to do it. Understand? הילקח אין זה מבטל את הכלי מהיכנו. Therefore, you did not take a vessel and broke it. You know what breaks the vessel with the oil? The oil breaks it. Over here, there's nothing inside. So therefore, you're allowed to do it. Huh? Smart. Next time, next thing, now you get even more complicated. What about if I put water in the vessel? Am I allowed to put it for the sparks?
Okay.
You say you're allowed to.
Okay, because sparks. Anyway.
I'm not seeing it. Okay, so let's see. ולא ייתן לתוכו אותו כלי מים, but you're not allowed to put water into it. You're not allowed to put water. Let's see why. And that, the water you're not allowed to put, you know, even when? Even before Shabbat. Which is why. I mean, on Shabbat, maybe I'll listen to you, but before Shabbat, that doesn't make sense at all. It's before Shabbat. What's the problem? Let's see. מפני שהוא מכבה. So now I'm going to tell you why not. On Shabbat itself, I understand why not. You know what you're doing? You are extinguishing the fire. There's a fire that's coming in. If you wouldn't put it there, it would stay 1 second longer. The spark would stay 1 second. You're making it 1 second less. You're making light. There was light in the room now from the spark, even a tiny little bit, I don't care how much. And you made the light 1 second less by extinguishing it. So that's why you're not allowed to on Shabbat. The question is, I understand that on Shabbat, I'm making the fire shorter. I'm making the light less. So that's why I'm not allowed to. But before Shabbat, what's the problem? I'm not doing it. It's by itself. Yeah, I'm not doing it. It's by itself. I'm doing something before Shabbat, what's the problem? Do you understand? Before Shabbat, you're allowed to do everything. What do you mean? It's before Shabbat.
אם הנר דלוק בשבת, ובשבת יש שמיים וזה מתחבר, זה אסור.
Yeah, but it's only asur if you put it on Shabbat. But over there, I put it before Shabbat, the water.
לא משנה.
Of course I'm allowed to. If I take a candle, right? A regular candle. You know who does it? On Hanukkah, you do it. You know, on Hanukkah, some people put oil and then to put some water. Or put water and then oil. Right? In the Hanukkah things, they put water a little bit because sometimes they don't want the oil to go for the 10 hours. They want it so they put water and then they put the oil so they only go to 2 hours or 3 hours. Right? So that's the same thing you do. You prepare water from beforehand. And that's not a problem to do in Shabbat. You'll be allowed to do it. So the question is, why are you not allowing me to do this? Let's see. ויש מבארים הטעם שגוזרים, and there are those who explains the reason שגוזרים ערב שבת משום שבת. It says, the truth is, you should be allowed to do it before Shabbat. But once people are used to do it before Shabbat, they put water and the vessel underneath it, they're not going to think. And they say, oh, I'm allowed to put the vessel underneath before Shabbat. On Shabbat, they're going to do what? The same thing. That's why we're not allowed to do them before Shabbat. It says, you're allowed to do before Shabbat, what kind of vessel you're allowed to put? Without water. With water before Shabbat, you should be allowed to do on Friday. It should be allowed. But we're afraid that once you're used to doing it before Shabbat, you do the same thing on Shabbat. That's why we don't allow them. Okay? שכן בשבת אסור לעשות כן, because on Shabbat itself you're not allowed to do so. שמא יגביה הכלי, because maybe you're going to take the vessel בשעת נפילת הניצוצות, ונמצא מכבה בשבת. Maybe you're going to take the vessel at the time that the sparks are falling in, and you're going to be extinguished on Shabbat. ולכן גזרו שאסור ליתן מים בכלי אף בערב Shabbat. That's why they said even before Shabbat don't put it on, because once you get used to it with the water, you'll do it with the water also on Shabbat. ואף על פי שבמלאכות אחרות שנינו שמותר להתחיל מהם בערב שבת, שתיגמרנו בשבת, even though we said about everything else, you're allowed to start a job from before Shabbat, that it will happen on Shabbat. Let's take an example. Let's say your tree is dying, right? It needs water. So you're allowed to, on Friday afternoon, open up the water, to go to the tree before, and it's going to continue to go to the entire Shabbat, the water. It's not called watering. It's not a problem, right? You're allowed to do it, because you started it when? Before Shabbat. So there's something over here. It says, usually we allow you to do things before Shabbat. Kegon, for example, it gives example of what things you're allowed to do before the Shabbat. Shriyat dio. Some objects you put in order to color them into a bath with ink. And sometimes it takes 6-7 hours. So are you allowed to start it before Shabbat? Yeah, and let it go throughout Shabbat. As long as you started it before Shabbat, you're fine. Prisat metzuda, we also learned that. Are you allowed to put a trap before Shabbat? So say you're allowed to put a trap before Shabbat. It will trap on Shabbat. You remember we learned that. It says over here they were strict. לפי שלא נראה לאנשים כאיסור כל כך במה שמניח כלי תחת הניצוצות. Because people don't think it's forbidden. It says, it doesn't look like I'm doing any work. ויש לחשוש שמא יבוא לידי חיבוי. We are worried, maybe people are going to forget that there's a difference between a vessel with water and a vessel without water. Then we think it's the same. And it's not the same. With water you're extinguishing. Without water you're not. But in your mind, what's the difference? It's so quick. It's anyway almost the same, right? So that's why they're afraid. שיתחיל ליתן המים בשבת קודם נפילת הניצוצות וקודם גמר הנתינה יפלו. So it says they're afraid they're going to put the water over there before on Shabbat ונמצא מכבה בידיים, and then what does he do? He's extinguishing it with his own hands. או שמא יגביה הכלי כמו שביארנו לעיל. Or he's going to take the vessel, and what he's going to do, and he's going to elevate it, and the spark has to fall all the way down. Now it falls a little bit less because you just elevated it, and that little bit less you extinguished it. So that's why we're not going to give you permission to do it.